The next meeting of the Reinventing Stamford initiative will take place this evening at UConn Stamford. The founder of the organization, Kip Bergstrom, talks about the organization's beginnings.
I think there's a lot of cities that are trying to reinvent themselves in different ways. I think what might set us apart is that we really started by trying to understand what are the big emerging conditions that are coming at us and what do those mean for Stamford. And so things that other folks might think of as problems, we tried to redefine as opportunities. Things like climate change and resource scarcity and financial turmoil and sclerotic government, so forth. Huge waves of change that will shape Stamford. And how do we harness that? How do we make opportunity out of the problem? The challenge is probably thinking too small, shooting too low. Stamford has some risk of setting expectations for itself that are less than what it can achieve. It really has an amazing opportunity to be what I call the new American city, that defines the American city in the 21st century.
Reinventing Stamford is now composed of 4 teams, each with its own initiative.
Well, one of the things that's going to be most visible about the initiative is the team that's trying to make Stamford a place of discovery that really has a vibrant public realm and sparkles. So they've come up with this idea to create 50 improvements to the pedestrian experience in 500 days. And they've kind of gone 2 directions with that. One is to look at calming some of the key intersections on Atlantic and Bedford Street, taking a page from New York City. If you remember what they've done in Times Square and the meatpacking districts, just with a bucket of paint, they've created overnight public spaces, wider pedestrian islands, and those spaces became colonized, just within hours of them being created. All of a sudden there was furniture there and people sitting in them, and it's a very low-cost way to create a more pedestrian-oriented streetscape and a constituency that would then support more permanent investment. Another way is blank walls that are all over the place in downtown Stamford and in the neighborhoods that really are pretty ugly right now. And sides of parking garages, highway abutments, walls on the mall, walls on buildings. So you can look at them as ugly, or you can look at them as blank canvases on which you can do public art. And with the right artist, and again, just with paint, you can transform something that's really deadening our pedestrian experience into something that's bringing color and life to it. So I think those are the things that folks will experience most directly, most immediately. But there's all kinds of other things that other teams are doing as well.
Others will be working with local schools to help develop an innovative workforce.
A huge part of Stamford's future has to do with education. I think it's the primary reason why families choose to live in a city, is that they believe their kids are going to get a good education. So it's just central to the future of Stamford. And if Stamford is going to be successful as a cradle of innovation, it has to have a lot of folks who are capable of innovating. And what that really boils down to is you can solve problems, and you can solve new problems that you haven't encountered before by applying your past experience to a new context. So what that team is doing is finding ways to mentor the next generation of problem solvers. To develop problem solvers, you'll really learn to solve problems by solving problems and doing it in the company of somebody that's very good at it. So if we're going to develop a citizenry and workforce of problem solvers at all levels, not just in the laboratory or the corporate suite, but really on the front line of every organization, we're going to have the community deeply engaged in helping teachers develop those kinds of graduates. So mentoring becomes a huge piece of the education process.
An important part of Reinventing Stamford, Bergstrom says, is not seeing our city as an isolated area.
So we're a talent pool, and it's an enormous talent pool. It's arguably the largest pool of talent, geographic concentration of talent anywhere on the planet. And so, and that's not just New York City, it's all of us around it. We're all pretty well connected to New York City, but we're not all that well connected to each other. And the question that the fourth team that's expanding regional networks is asking is, what if we were better connected? What would that do for us? How could that improve our capability to innovate, to chase these opportunities in emerging conditions? So Stamford has invested some time in convening our sister cities in the metro. And out of that effort has come an initial success at getting a federal grant of $3.5 million to support implementation planning of some of these ideas.
The fourth team will address job creation.
Well, you know, what started Reinventing Stamford in part was the prospect of a meltdown of the financial system after Lehman Brothers blew up. And, you know, people were at the time talking about Wall Street versus Main Street, but in Stamford, Wall Street is Main Street. So Stamford was really at risk in terms of its job base had there been that kind of meltdown of the financial system. We can't have all of our eggs in the financial services basket. We really got to nurture the emergent sectors that tend to be smaller, more entrepreneurial, more innovative. So the importance of Team One's effort to grow an ecosystem to support innovative entrepreneurial companies is really critical. That's where job growth in Stamford and Connecticut and the New York Metro as a whole is going to come from for the next decades. It's going to be in emergent sectors that have potential to expand here, and there's many of them.
And while he says Stamford risks shooting too low and not setting its sights high enough, Bergstrom says local residents stand poised to make the most of this opportunity.
Reinventing Stamford has been about is not creating a bill of particulars that this group takes to city government or some other government and petitions it to make those changes. It's about saying to citizens, take the reins of your future in your own hands. You are permitted, empowered to shape your own destiny.